in the book of Ephesians. In fact, the first 3 chapters, if you haven't studied in depth the book of Ephesians, just want to give you a brief overview. The first 3 chapters are all about doctrinal matters. When you look at Ephesians chapter 1, 2, and 3, we read about the kind of faith we are supposed to have based on the truths that we find in these chapters. They're the foundation to our faith. And one of the blessings we read about is that in Jesus Christ we have every spiritual blessing. We've been adopted as children. We now know the hope in Jesus Christ. In chapter 2 we read about how, yes, we were dead in sin. Yes, we were without hope. Yes, we were foreigners. We were aliens. Yet Jesus died for us. Now the dividing wall of hostility has been broken down. I can now have peace with my God, and I can have peace with you through Jesus Christ. Again, He has made me a good workman. He's made me someone different. In Ephesians chapter 3, we read that this message of the gospel was actually a mystery for time upon time until Jesus Christ came, until the Holy Spirit came and revealed all truth to us. This at one point was now a mystery, but now we have this mystery solved. We can now be grounded and rooted in the love of Jesus Christ. We can be filled with His Spirit. And that God is able to do abundantly beyond what we could ever think or imagine through the power that is working in us. Those are the first 3 chapters of the book of Ephesians. And then Ephesians 4, 5, and 6 become more about practical things. Now that I have the foundation for my faith, how then shall I live? And this is when Paul, he did talk about in Ephesians chapter 2 about how we used to walk according to the ways of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air. But now in Ephesians chapter 4, I am to walk worthy of the calling by which I was called. The calling of God, the calling of Jesus Christ is not just that I have this great foundation. I must now build on top of this foundation a spiritual house which glorifies God. I'm to be united. We're to be united together. We need to grow together in Jesus Christ. We need to grow so that we continue to work in the way that God had designed for us to work. That we're not to hold on to our anger, but we're to speak truth to our neighbor. In Ephesians chapter 5, we read about how we're to be imitators of God, and we're to walk in so many different ways. We're to walk in love, we're to walk in light, and we're to walk in wisdom. And then Ephesians chapter 6, at the end of Ephesians 5, he gives some practical matters regarding spouse relationships between parents and their children, between the servant, the slave, and his earthly master. He gives some understanding of how individuals ought to live, how they ought to walk into their capacity. And then he ends by saying that you need to be empowered. You ever read that word strengthen in Ephesians chapter 6? It actually refers to being empowered by God. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 10. Finally, be strong. Be empowered in the Lord and in the strength of His might. We're to equip ourselves with the armor of God, praying continually in all things. I want us to focus on chapter 5 just for a few minutes, and the lesson will be yours. I want to focus on chapter 5 specifically with walking in wisdom. I'm thinking, okay, I have 5.5, 6 hours until the new year. Some places in this world are already celebrating the new year. That's okay. How do I want to walk in 2018? What's good about these segmented times where we think about beginning new, and we have our New Year's resolutions and all of that, something that's good about it is we can look at each other in the face and say, what do you want to accomplish this next year? And you can answer with honesty, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that. And we kind of encourage each other. Well, the question is, how do I want to walk as a Christian in 2018? Can I tell you, and can you hold me to it? Can you be honest with yourselves, and I hold you to it? As we think about the idea of walking in wisdom, I want us to take from Ephesians 5, verses 15, 16, and 17. These don't have to be called resolutions. I don't like that because I think it was about 80% of New Year's resolutions dissolved by February. Okay, I want us to take it more seriously than even New Year's resolutions, but here are 3 truths about what it means to walk in wisdom. The first truth, let's look carefully in 2018. What do I mean by that? Let's look carefully in 2018. Notice verse 15. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. I'm about to show a picture. It's a very serious picture on the screen, and I want you to just look at it. I want you to just take it in. You ready? I want you to take that in, because I want to talk about the woes of Wile E. Coyote. If you didn't even know that was his full name, that's his full name. Wile E. Coyote. You know, I grew up watching the Looney Tunes as a kid. I don't know if you did, but I did. Even if they were reruns, they were new to me. And something I really enjoyed about Wile E. Coyote is he always tried to just get some dinner. All he wanted was some dinner, but he never watched where he was going. And he'd often take, I can't do it, but he'd often take 4 or 5 steps off a cliff before he realized where he was going. And he would stop and he'd look down, and then he'd look right at the camera with the sadness in his face, and he would just plummet. And I think about the idea of Wile E. Coyote. You know, we often have a goal in mind, but we're not watching where we're going. And that is where we see the woes of Wile E. Coyote. And I want you to think about this comical cartoon character, the idea that he wasn't paying attention until it was too late. He wasn't walking with a purpose. Notice in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15, Paul said, "Look carefully then how you walk." Some translations say, "Be careful how you live." The word "be" there actually better translates as look or observe, pay attention. Paul might as well be saying, look before you leap. Watch where you're going. Carefully carries the idea of being accurate or exact. Some translations say walk circumspectly. Watch very carefully where you are going as you are going. It reminds me of what Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 through 26. Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Run with purpose. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath or a perishable crown, but we do so for an imperishable crown. So I do not run aimlessly. I'm not one who boxes as one beating the air. Paul says, live with purpose. Pay attention. Observe where you're going, or else you'll find yourself in Satan's snares, in Satan's traps. Paul says we see the race. There was a competition very similar to what we have as the Olympics in the first century. It was based out of Corinth. And I want you to imagine, if you ever watch the Olympics, if you ever watch the runners getting ready, nobody just takes their time and as they're all lining up, everybody gets down and they have a purpose and they're ready to run. And as soon as that bell goes, or as soon as that gun shoots, they're immediately off and they're sprinting. No one's just lightly jogging, looking at butterflies or other people in the stands and waving at them. They're running with a purpose so they can receive the crown. How many Christians, as soon as they are baptized, turn on autopilot and hope that they'll be okay? Thinking about the woes of Wile E. Coyote, thinking about running, and before you know it, going off of a cliff, I think about running carefully. I think about looking carefully, and I think about this idea of wisdom. Verse 15, not as unwise, but as wise. Choosing wisdom over folly. I'll never forget what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10 when He's with His disciples. And so, in fact, one of my favorite phrases, or one of my favorite sentences Jesus ever uttered, and there are a lot to choose from. I love this. Behold, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. You know, just because I'm innocent doesn't mean I have to be naive. I want you to think about that. I'm to be wise. I'm to be as cunning as a serpent. Meanwhile, innocent as a dove, pure, holy. Jesus said there are a lot of wolves out there. In fact, there are a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing. You need to be careful. You need to watch your step. Well, with what kind of wisdom? We're not talking about grannies and papa's wisdom while you're sitting on their lap and they're in the rocking chair and telling you what for. We're talking about a different kind of wisdom. How do I obtain wisdom? Well, when I read the book of Proverbs, in Proverbs chapter 9, I read that the beginning of wisdom is by fearing the Lord. You can be one of the most knowledgeable, intellectual Christians this world has ever seen without having a drop of wisdom. You can be as smart as any other Christian. You can quote as many verses, having memorized the entire Old Testament and the New Testament, without having a single drop of wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge correctly applied. I think about what Peter wrote in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Be sober, be vigilant, for your adversary the devil prowls about. He's walking about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. You go back to the words of Jesus. What kind of gate leads to destruction? The wide gate. The wide way, the broad way leads to destruction, and many go in by it. For narrow is the gate, difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are very few who find it. I not only need to be paying attention, but I need to be wise with the things that I'm doing. And I need to have that heavenly wisdom. When you look at the book of James, James chapter 3, we read that there are two different types of wisdom. There's the heavenly wisdom, which is pure. And then there's the earthly wisdom, which is described as demonic. Am I seeking God? Am I seeking to glorify God in everything that I do? Okay, I know that to fear the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but how do I gain more wisdom? Let me ask you that, church. How do you gain more wisdom? In James chapter 1, verse 5, we are told the answer. If any of you lacks wisdom, ask it of God. Ask of God, and He will give it to anyone liberally. God will give it to us liberally. What I'm asking you to do tonight is to watch your step. Pay close attention on how you walk, by the way you walk, with wisdom. Do not be as the unwise. Do not be like we were before we became children of God. Instead, ask God to direct your steps. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your steps. Secondly, I know our time is already getting close to an end in 2017, as is this clicker. That might be one of my New Year's resolutions, is to get a new clicker. Let's see, it may not be working, that's okay. There we go. Secondly, let's buy the moment in 2018. Let's buy the moment in 2018. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 16, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Some translations might have redeeming the time, for the days are evil. Kevin, can you hit that next slide? What is our most precious possession? And the answers can vary based on your perspective. Obviously, Jesus Christ, or obviously salvation for our souls. But when you think about just day by day, what is our most precious possession? Well, clearly it'd have to be something that we have, that we lose, which we can never obtain again. And that is time. You can have all the money in the world and still run out of time. When you run out of time, your life is over. Time is our most precious possession. When Paul wrote here in verse 16, making the best use of the time, that word time there is not the typical word you would use for just talking about time, the continuous time by which you can measure using hours, minutes, seconds. In fact, Paul uses a very special word here for time. That's why some translations have it as the time. It's referring to a special occasion. It's referring to an opportunity. It's referring to a select or measured moment. When Paul refers to make most of the time, he's saying that our time is limited. There are boundaries set on our lives. That once those boundaries end, once we exceed those boundaries, our lives are over. I do not know when my life will be over. But I do know that at one point it will be over. Therefore, my time is limited. Therefore, I need to make most of it. I need to accept the fact that one day my life will end. Once I can accept the fact that by no amount of vitamins or any other man-made creation that my life will come to an end, I will realize how precious time truly is. I once read, and this is a quote that people quote often and they attribute it to some other person. You probably can't even trace where it originated. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. You hear a lot of football coaches say that, other people say that, but I want you to think about that. I know Willard talked about lady luck this morning. Finding luck. You know, we always talk about luck as though it's like the wind. You try to grasp it and you can't fully get it. I can make my own luck by preparing myself so that when opportunity comes, I can find it. When I find opportunity to do something, if I'm prepared, I can do it to the best of my ability. And that can apply to so many different things. Job, different kind of job, better job, pay increase, or trying to get a good deal. Like so many people will be getting a good deal tomorrow morning at the stores. You know, you try to find luck. You really are just preparing yourself for the exact opportunity, and if you act on it, you will exceed. When I think about being lucky in serving Jesus Christ, the idea that if I'm prepared to serve God, if I'm prepared to preach His Word, if I'm prepared to teach someone who's lost, if I'm prepared and the opportunity arises and I take it, I will exceed as a Christian. Do I want 2018 to be a time where, when it's over, I can look back and say, wow, I remember that opportunity I had and I took it, and I'm so blessed because of it? Or will it, by the end of 2018, while I look back and think, oh, I regret that time I was talking to my brother, and religion came up and he just wasn't that interested and I didn't really pursue it. Well, I look back and think, well, I remember talking to my coworker, my neighbor, my spouse, my parents, my children, and if I only had pushed a little bit more, if I only had shown a little bit more compassion, maybe things would be different. Making your own luck. The last thing I ever want to find in my life is to be like the rich man in Luke chapter 16. I want you to think about this rich man. This rich man, he ate sumptuously. I love that idea. He feasted daily. He had a good life by worldly standards. I mean, he ate every day. He had all the wealth in the world. Meanwhile, there's this lowly beggar at his gate who desired just to have some food. I can't imagine living my life being blessed in this world and one day waking up in a place of torment. But I think the worst part of Luke 16 is not the fact that the rich man woke up in torment, not the fact that he believed one drop of water would cool his tongue, not the fact that he would never find help or comfort again because there was a great barrier fixed between him, a great gulf between him and those who could help him. I think the worst part about Luke 16 is the fact that he remembered he had 5 brothers and he could not do a thing to warn them of the torment that was to come. When I look back at my life, whether I am saved or not, I also have to ask myself a question. Are there those who could have been helped? That just didn't help. If I make it into heaven, and by making, I mean if I submit myself to God and I trust His Word and I walk in the light, let's say I do all those things and I'm in heaven, will there be people at the last day, as we sing the song, "You Never Mentioned Him to Me"? I think that's what's so horrible about Luke 16, and I think that is an awful truth that we very well might face someday if we do not make most of the time that we have. Because, Kevin, you want to hit that button again for me? Because evil days are ahead. I only have 3 more slides, Kevin, I promise. Maybe 2. Evil days are ahead. John Chrysostom, an early, what's called a church father, early Christian preacher, said, when talking about evil days, what do we mean by evil days? The days themselves are evil? No. It is not the essence of the thing or the day that is evil. It is not the thing as so created that makes it evil. Rather, it is the things transacted in them. What he's saying is that the day itself is not evil. Rather, the things which occur during the day are evil. We live in an evil time. We live in an evil age. And what Paul said in Philippians chapter 2, verse 15, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation among whom you shine as lights in the world. You can ask yourself tonight, am I shining in a crooked and perverse world where evil is done? Am I making a difference in the dark ages of today? Caution, evil days are ahead. So how am I using the time God has given me? The idea of redeeming is the idea of buying back. Let's buy the moment. Let's take advantage of the opportunity God has given us while He has given it to us. Finally, next slide. Finally, third, let's seek to understand in 2018. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Final slide. Who is responsible? Whose responsibility is it for me to know God? When I read Ephesians chapter 5, verse 17, therefore do not be foolish, but understand. As I accepted that my time is limited, I must also accept that it is my responsibility to seek God. Not anyone else. It's not my spouse, not my children. Nobody else but me to seek God. How do I please Him? How do I glorify Him? I was talking about in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15, that I'm not to be unwise, but I'm to be wise. Well, how do I become wise, Paul? Paul said, well, don't be foolish. And the word foolish here means empty-headed. There's another Greek word which it means fool, and it's moros, and used in a certain way, it's moron, which is by which we have the word moron. Paul says, don't be foolish, don't be empty-headed, be wise. What does it mean to be wise? Understand the will of the Lord. Understand and apply His will to your life. That's what it means. And I have to accept tonight that it is my responsibility to seek Him. I need to know Psalm 37 verse 4, delight yourself in the Lord and He will give you the desires of your heart. What a grand promise that we just overlooked, that God will bless me by my desires of the heart. Not just saying I want a new car, I have a new car, but the innermost craving of my soul, God not only knows it, but He will bless me with it. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added to you. I need to know. I need to understand that I must seek Him. But it's such a comfort to me as we close to know that I can find God. I can seek Him. And by seeking Him, I can come to know Him. God is not far from me. He's not far from you tonight. I will never fully grasp the majesty of God, but He has given me all things which pertain to life and godliness. And if I look for Him, I know that I can find Him. It's such a great balance of love and responsibility, love and freedom, which God has blessed me tonight. So where are you walking in 2018? What are your goals? More importantly, what is the Lord's will for your life? As Willard talked about this morning, James chapter 4, verses 14 through 16. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you're a mist that appears for a little while and passes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, I will go and do such a thing. We will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. Well, let's not be arrogant tonight. let's be wise. Perhaps in seeking this wisdom, we will realize that we need to redeem this moment in 2017. This might be your shining moment in an otherwise dark year. This might be the time that will change your course, change the course of your eternal destiny, right here, right now. Will you look carefully to this moment and realize that you need Jesus Christ? Will you buy back the time that could slip away, but instead you take advantage of right here, right now? Will you at this moment seek to understand the will of God? Because as we talked about, we may not have the promise of tomorrow morning to begin the new resolutions, to begin the new life for 2018. But what we do have is now. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate. Don't wait. Look carefully. Buy this opportunity. Redeem it. And seek God. Anything at all, come now while we stand and while we sing.